We are live. So,
hey girl.
Welcome, Julie Saltman. I am so excited for this interview.
I've been like counting the minutes. I'm so excited.
And there's a lot to talk about because you're doing so many exciting things. So we're going to jump right in. We met, I'm pretty sure we met years ago at a CTI networking event, but yeah. I remember I think it was like a purple card with the name of your show. And I remember the fairies and you talking about the fairies. So that was before VR was in anyone's minds. But we kind of officially re-met at this panel that I just hosted about the intersection of VR and theater through DJ Smith.
Right.
Of Glimpse Entertainment. Is that
Glimpse
Group? Right. So yes, so thank you for joining us. And now you've been all over the map as far as your career, but why don't you just start with giving us like your elevator pitch about you and your work?
Okay. Well, I am Julie Saltman, and I am a costume designer and a producer. And my show is called Taking Wing. It has griffins, phoenixes, and butterfly fairies, and the platform is very close to the Giving Tree. We have an anti-bullying message, and one of the biggest themes in the show is it doesn't take goods to do good. And in the end, everybody learns a lesson. So it's not happily ever after, it's hopefully ever after. And we've brought it it's been through New York Theater Festival, it's been to the Duke Theater, and now it is destined to be virtual reality before ultimately going to Broadway.
Cool, very exciting. And we're going to talk a lot about the show. But before we get to the show, I want to learn more about you. And so I know you started as a costume designer and you did Lestat on Broadway and you worked on High Fidelity, Spring Awakening, and even Spiderman. So, and then you transitioned into being a producer. So tell us a little bit about that, how you got from costume designing to the other side of the table producing.
Yeah, the Broadway shows I worked on, I wasn't necessarily the costume designer on those shows. I just wanted to clarify that. I've been in all kinds of capacities on all kinds of shows. But I am still a costume designer, and I will still be doing the costumes for Taking Wing. But what ultimately happened was I was supposed to be the costume designer for a film that was supposed to go to Chile, and a week and a half before, there was the earthquake in Chile, and the whole thing got canceled. Long story short, then I was out of work for 4 months because I was supposed to go to Chile and never did. And I was on a 4th of July trip in Connecticut with some producers and some theater people and a friend of mine, whose birthday it was, where I met, for the third time, I met David Garfinkel, and we started talking. And that Tuesday, after that 4th of July weekend, he called me up and I looked at my cell phone, which said Spiderman. And I said, "Excuse me." And he said, "Why don't you come be my assistant?" And as you know, I spent a year in the office, which is a story that we will get into later. But after I did Spiderman for a year, I really wanted to use all of that knowledge for good. And I wanted to help my friends who had shows and were doing readings and how to get the right people to see it and how to further their career. So I was trying to use that year experience and pay it forward to everybody that I could.
Oh, cool. So David Garfinkel was basically your entree into producing?
Yes, he was.
Amazing. Absolutely. If only we could all be so lucky. Awesome.
Lucky? Okay. We'll go with that word.
It's definitely a high level. One of my mentors said to me early on in my career that he saw the producer glint in my eye because I did not think of myself as a producer. And I definitely see that glint in your eye too. It's so funny. I definitely think of you more as a producer than a costume designer. But, and I guess David must have seen that in you as well.
Well, what David and a lot of people, and what you're seeing right now, which I am told, is what I am never the person who can just get a job. I have to create it. I have to create what's happening. I can't talk about it. I can't sit and wait for a job to come up. I always have to be moving forward, which is what ultimately makes you a good producer. So,
I mean, and that's what I call #another way. So that is why you're on this podcast, which is awesome. So cool. Which also brings us now to your road to VR. So talk to us about how you slipped, because when I met you, the show, I think it was the same show, Taking Wing, but it wasn't VR yet. So how did you kind of slip into the world of VR?
So going back to Spiderman for a second, 9 years ago when I was in David's office, it was a very Melanie Griffith and Working Girl moment where my boss was in London and there was a pile of invitations on the desk. And one was for a VR AR conference. And I had no idea what that was, but it did say technology. So the only thing I thought to myself is, great, straight men in suits with jobs. I want to go. That's really all I thought. And, but in all fairness, I called them up and I said, I am not David Garfinkel. I am his assistant. Is it okay if I come to this event? They said, we would love to have you. So I went and I found my most conservative thing that I could find because, gosh, I have a lot of things for like a technology conference. So I got dressed and I went and there were a lot of people there from film and television and like all these kinds of things. And
what year was that?
That was 2011.
Okay. Wow.
And so that was before Spider-Man even opened. And and I was like, wow, check this out. And then people started like, you're in Spider-Man and you're here. And, so I got into lots of conversations with lots of people. And that led me to the next conference, which was Digital Hollywood, where it really was Hollywood meets technology. And that is when a fabulous Asian guy walks into the room and sort of the room, the wave part, and everyone's just sort of looking at him. He was wearing this fabulous jacket. So I walked up and I said, oh my God, I love your jacket. It's fabulous. And everyone's like, how is she talking to him? And that was Ryan Wang, and who is now an incredible friend of mine. And then,
and just for people at home, he's a VC in San Francisco, venture capitalist, right?
Yeah.
In San Francisco.
Yeah. And so literally 10 minutes later on the main stage with 600 people listening, he was in the center of the stage. And I went, oh my God, that's the one I just want. Okay.
Chose wisely.
I'm like, it's like those people who walk up to a Broadway celebrity who don't see Broadway and don't know who they are. I did the exact same thing in the other order. So, and Ryan and I kept in touch. And then and once you get on these lists, you get all the invitations for yourself. So I really started going to every VR, AR, Digital Hollywood, this film festival, like everything that had it. So I was learning everything that this technology could do and who was using it and who wasn't using it and all those kinds of fabulous things. And then, of course, hanging out with Ryan, helps. And so that's what led me to the idea of, well, the land of Emimencia, which is where Taking Wing takes place, is all up in the air. So having that in a virtual headset makes sense. And it's also, a magical world where everything's up in the air. So in virtual reality, hey, that's perfect. So that's sort of where that journey started. So
very cool. Okay. So now give us you kind of did already, but a quick elevator pitch of the plot for Taking Wing, because I think that's really relevant to your work.
Yeah, the plot of Taking Wing, I have to admit, not a compliment to myself, but it is my story. And it is very much like the giving tree that King Maldor is giving everything to the flutter fairy Naya. And so that she can not be bullied by the other fairies. And she goes through a journey of trying to grow up and trying to do this. And King Maldor just keeps giving her everything. And Valides the Phoenix is our narrator, who is sort of overseeing this all like as a lead player. And he just keeps giving and giving, and she keeps taking and taking. And the goblins are not violent. They're funny. They take. Everything is about stealing. It's what you're taking and what you're giving is the real themes of the show. And of course, there's the goblin battle where they're coming to take everything. And then Naya learns the lesson and gives everything to the goblins in order to save everybody and becomes this Griff fairy. And King Maldor as well learns the lesson of, maybe you shouldn't just give everything away and maybe you shouldn't just take everything. And everybody lives together, hopefully ever after.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Which is also a little arts meets biz. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my story, so obviously, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's relevant. so you've got griffins and goblins and a phoenix and all these kind of mythological creatures. And just because, you know, my book is about Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, where he talks a lot about archetypes. So I'm curious if you consciously used archetypes, or if you were more drawn to the fantasy side of it.
Definitely drawn to the fantasy side of it, but I did stay true to the myths. Like, the first thing that King Maldor gives away is his claws, because his claws can make a magical goblet. That comes straight out of Greek mythology. I didn't make that up, and that's part of the story. So some people are like, well, why does it become a goblet? I'm like, because that's Greek mythology. I didn't make it. Yeah, so I tried to stay true to the Greek mythology, but much more interested in you know, the fairies and the, you know, all of those mythical creatures.
Yeah, so. Cool. Yeah, and that's what's great about archetypes, by the way, is that when there's always deeper meanings. So it actually just adds this whole other level to your show, you know, which is really cool. And it's also kind of, I think, why BroadwaCon was so appropriate for the fantasy side of it. So tell us about BroadwaCon. How cool was that?
Oh my God. Okay. For the rest of my life, it will land in the top 5 of my favorite moments. I had such a blast being the head of a panel of BroadwaCon. And the fact that I was trusted with it, because everybody knew my journey and you know, the title being, what is it going to take to bring special effects to Broadway? And I had this incredible panel of Jim Glubb, who you know, and Bradley Lassiter, who from Lestat, who was actually my original Valides in the play, but now he has his own tech company. And of course, DJ Smith, and, you know, and Emmy, who is in Finland, and I hope she is wonderful and staying safe. But all of these people who were all working with how to bring entertainment and technology together as a thing. And every single one of them has been key to my journey to this point. And I'm so grateful to them for that. And that day was just, oh my God, I just loved it. And I'm so grateful to BroadwaCon. And I don't need Disneyland and Disney World. I've got BroadwaCon. That's all, you know, once a year.
Yeah, and you belong there. The characters totally fit. So before we get more into the tech side of it, you've already got some actors cast in these lead roles, and one of them is in the very lead role, Naya, right? Is Tori Feinstein?
Yes. She's actually been Naya for 3 years.
Cool.
And she's actually the only one that has been consistently the same character through 90% of it. In the very beginning, she was too young and in school, so we had one Naya when it was back in the days when it was a puppet show. But Tori has been Naya ever since, and moving forward, I hope she remains Naya. I will go to battle for her forever. I hope she remains Naya. I mean, even though the show, there is no he, she, or they, and Naya could be played by a boy or a girl or anything like that, she is the right person for this character. So. Nice. Yeah, she's
definitely up and coming star, I think. And she participated in the Broadway Kids Against Bullying, which is so apropos for your show, which is anti-bullying.
Message, yes.
So that's nice.
And she sang the title song, Taking Wing, in Earth Day, in an anti-bullying thing right in Times Square. And that video is awesome and has gone all over the place too, which was awesome.
Cool. And you also have Christian, I have such a hard time with that name, Tierney.
Chris Tierney.
Chris, yeah. Chris, it's much easier to say. I've always had a hard time with that name.
Right. No, actually, Chris Tierney has been, like, we have been chosen family since Spiderman Turn Off the Dark. We're very close. And because it's a drama and not a musical right now, it is fine to put Chris Tierney as King Maldor. He'll be the first one to tell you he shouldn't be singing. So he won't be upset with me that I said that. Yeah. But yes, those are the, you know, for right now, and for this, hopefully as soon as we have the next draft comes out August 20th, and we will be doing some sort of reading. We're going to talk to SAG-AFTRA about the right way to do it, because when you're doing green screen and VR, you're dealing with SAG-AFTRA. You're not dealing with equity at all, because it's filming. So, and they are SAG-AFTRA, so thank God. So they're the two that I will go to the mat for on this one. So
cool. Yeah. So since we're kind of there, talk us through the timeline, not in terms of time, but in terms of how this show is going to develop. So first, there's going to be the 3D headset that people can experience on their own, and then it moves into the theater? How does that?
Yeah. So I'm basically using VR and the technology to get the story out there, and to get all of that technology put into the computer. I'm going to stay in my own lane on this one. I'm not going to explain it. I'm just going to say it happens. And so once it's in VR and people can watch it in their headset at home, and there'll be like VR places where 10 people can see it at once, and I'm sure it will go to conferences and that kind of thing. Then once everyone loves the story so much, it's going to be the first VR show to become a Broadway show, just like Beetlejuice the movie wasn't a musical. It went from a movie to being a musical. This is going to go from the story in VR to a full Broadway production using the technology that they've already put into the headset, but they're going to transfer it to what is known as immersive reality, video mapping, and augmented reality. So that when you come into the theater, you are not wearing a headset, you are not turning on a phone, you are not using a tablet. It is happening all around you.
Very clear. Thank you. And actually, yeah, it's so complicated. And it is this new technology, which is so cool because you're working with a lot with these kind of, I call them technologists. I guess maybe they're engineers who are creating this new technology, which is so cool. And so you've got this whole other side that theater people are not used to at all. So what has that experience been like developing this stuff with the technologists? And that's a different language, I imagine, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry, say that again?
It's a different language, right? They don't speak Broadway speak.
Right. And that's kind of funny. I love to call it Broadway.
Yeah, nice.
It's Broadway. Yeah. And it's only because I've been to all these conferences and talked to all these people that I know what a deck is, and I know what a proposal is, and I know who wants to look at what, and how to say to DJ what, you know, what I need to say to Brian Prather, who is my production designer, and how to bring them together along with Jordan and, you know, whoever else is. Yeah. And it's in also the technologists or the engineers, they don't want to just hear that the trees in Emimencia are stained glass and the water goes up or whatever. They want to know how that happened. How did it grow and whatever? And we're busy going, oh no, it's magic. And it's just, so watching that dynamic is lots of fun. And it's been a challenge to write the script given that, because we're like, okay, we're still trying to make the technology people happy, because in the land of Emimencia, fairy elixir goes up and we have flutter fairies and flutter pillars. So it's not like a traditional caterpillar, because we're creating an entire fandom world. So here are our engineers and our designers going, you get to do everything from scratch, going, yay, and that's scary.
Yeah.
So it's been, yeah, and also taking things out of the script that have anything to do with the human world. Right. And, you know, so there are wub bars, you know, there's none of those in, you know, I lost the Snozberry fight because that was kind of Willy Wonka, you know, so things like, we go back and forth on things like that.
But it would be nice, you know, if Disney is listening, or if anyone, you know, who wants to come around and say, oh, we could put a land of Emimencia into Disneyland or something. So why don't I just infuse you with some more money and technology to really build that world? Because there's such a richness here with the names of these characters and these mythological creatures and all of that. There's so much opportunity here for not just a story, but for technology and the, you know, VR and AR and all this stuff. Very exciting.
Because the sky isn't even the limit. And as far as all that goes, bring it. I'm ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I've talked to a few producers who have tried to bridge the divide with VR people, these engineers, and who have not been successful. So I also just really want to applaud you in being able to I'm sure there's a lot of patience involved, because they're interested in different aspects, you know, than you are, as you mentioned. And one of the things you said in the panel discussion about VR and theater is that it has to come down to the story first.
Yes.
And you're very clear on your story, and I think that helps. And but also you're juggling both sides. So I just wanted to applaud you for that.
Yeah, I mean, but it's also much easier for me than it is for anybody else, because it is a fairy tale world. People who want to put Tennessee Williams in a VR headset it's not going to fly.
Yeah.
Also, what I was trying to say at that other panel, which I will say here too, all the technology in the world and fiber optic wings and music will not, and $75 million will not save you if you do not have a strong story.
Absolutely. Yeah. Didn't we learn that from Spiderman?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
You learn that with lots of Broadway shows. Like lots of Broadway shows go to Broadway too soon and then suddenly they're closed in 6 months. You know, it happens a lot. It's like if you don't, you know, the celebrities are, you know, doing amazing things and everybody is trying to, you know, everybody is professional and doing all this. But again, it comes right back to that same thing. If you don't have that foundation, your foundation's going to crack and that bridge is going to fall.
Right. And yeah, and you're in such a unique, your experience is so unique. It has put you really into this. In some ways, it's like you've been called to this, I feel like, because you lived through intimately the whole Spider-Man drama. And I'm sure you picked up so much from that you can take with you, you know. And then also, I think there's an interesting parallel between Spider-Man and what you're doing, because Spider-Man at the time was, you know, this new technology as far as flying goes in theater, and, you know, how they had to rebuild the theater, not literally, but, you know, redesign the theater in some ways. And it was very radical and a departure. And we kind of saw that break down, I think, because of communication and for whatever reason, which we don't have to go into the politics of it. But what's interesting to me is that at the time, you know, there was a lot of industry buzz, and there was a lot, and in some ways, I think like everything just went wrong. And so it feels like you're doing very early on, you're doing everything right. Hopefully, you know, but what can you speak to those parallels a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I will say this has been my tagline for like 8 years now. I learned everything I never wanted to know.
Yeah, I bet.
But I do know them, and so a lot of the time I am the black cloud over, you know, a lot of people's head, because I'll be like, no, you can't do that. No, this has to wait. No, because everyone's always like, I want it to happen tomorrow, and blah, and I'm like, no, you're not ready, and no, you shouldn't be doing this and whatever. I say that a lot, and people are like, how is she a producer and such a negative Nancy? I'm like, well, you know, I know what can happen. And but that doesn't stop. But on the other hand, what people don't acknowledge, and thank you for acknowledging it, is it doesn't stop me.
Right.
You know, it's never stopped anything. It's just said, okay, we have to go in this direction because of ... or whatever else. But also, again, going into a theater and going in too fast, and with all the delays of Spider-Man, it's like, again, if you don't have the story and you don't have, before you start paying $1 million a week for a show, guess what? You don't get to back up.
Right. So
if like in productions like spectacle productions, you live and die in the preparation of it.
Right.
Once you get there, that's the money you have, that's the people you have, or you can delay 7 times. So that's a lot of, you know, what that came down to. It was like, okay, well, it's not ready, it's not ready, it's not ready, it's not ready. Well, if more shows, not just Broadway, but a lot of these people who do independent films or, you know, even festivals, if they would just be ready first, and understand you know, Lin-Manuel Miranda says all the time that it took him 6 years to make Hamilton. He had a Tony Award. He actually sang at the White House, and it took him 6 years.
Right. Yeah, development is so, and there's a question about development, which I'm going to get to in a second, but development is so squeezed in the theater, unfortunately, and it's really hard to take that time, and a lot of people learned those lessons the hard way. Right. And one of the exciting things I think about what you're doing is that everything is so new. You're having to make up the rules as you go, and that in some ways you can make that time for development. So remembering that and having learned those lessons, I think, are again just on your side. It's like it's been so it's helping you actually pave a way that's going to work. And also I think it's about collaboration. Right. And, you know, whereas when you're collaborating kind of, I think maybe with Spider-Man, it's insular, you know, they're all theater people for the most part. And you're dealing with people who you have to really take the time to collaborate and communicate, and taking that extra time for your development, I think, is really helping you.
It is. I mean, you're 80% right, but there are always, as I'm sure you run into too, that when you are doing something new or whatever, people think they know the rules already. They think they know how it's supposed to happen because they did A, B, and C, or this person went through this or whatever else. So that actually hurt me back in 2018. Of the people go, no, it has to be this way, and you have to do this, and you have to do that. I'm like, no, says who? Not for this show and not in this situation. And, you know, I mean, I had to say that a lot, which wasn't fun. And then, but you do learn who's on the page with you and who isn't. And people tend to weed themselves out quickly. And then the ones who are supposed to be there are still there. So you're just, and it's also people who are willing to say, oh my God, this is new. I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. But wouldn't it be cool if? So
yeah. So cool. I mean, that's why too, you're so perfect to kind of represent hashtag another way, because a lot of people get overwhelmed by this kind of, you know, no, you have to do it this way. No, you have to do it this way. And you're very strong, as you said earlier, of saying, no, actually, you know, I don't have to do it that way. We're making it up as we go along. And again, taking that time. So I just wanted to applaud you for that. There is a question that came in that says, that I think is really interesting. What is script development like when you don't get audience response to your narrative? What is the development path like? And this is from Tony Castrino. I hope I didn't ask her his name.
Yeah, it's been hard. And, you know, when I had audience, you know, whatever, it was obviously much different. But now, what is also hard for me is that the fact that even when we do these readings or we look at it, we're talking to people who have already heard it a million times in a million different ways. So the worst part about it is, wait, I missed that scene that you cut, or I wanted this. I especially after the last one, I got a lot of that. And because of Zoom, you can't. Even if I paid everyone and I followed all the rules, those recordings are crap. they don't help. So I couldn't share them if I wanted to. And so yeah, it hasn't been great. Yes, Tony, I'm sorry if that was discouraging, but because of the pandemic, more people are willing to read it that weren't willing to necessarily sit down and read it before. And I've tried to reach out to people who knew nothing about it before and said, tell me what you think about this now, that have nothing to do with anything. And yeah, it's a pandemic. They had nothing better to do. So that was helpful. Because, you know, I know it's my story. I know I've heard it 100 times and I'm trying to listen to everybody. And that's also something I want to talk to SAG-AFTRA about. What is it going to take for me to be able to invite people from their homes to listen and have it be allowed?
Right.
So that I won't have an audience, but maybe I can get comments from people hearing it the first time who have nothing to do with anything, maybe, you know, and that kind of thing. But that is a question I am going to be asking, because right now that sucks.
Yeah, it's challenging. There's all kinds of new ways. I think of development as like a Roomba, where, you know, an image of a Roomba that hits a wall and then it just repivots. No judgment. You know, we're not saying, damn you wall, it's just this way now, gotta go this way. And I imagine you're pivoting a lot.
Yes.
With the pandemic now, you know, but it's like, in some ways, everything, you know, you're so out of the box and your path is so non-traditional that the pandemic is just one more wall.
It was, and originally it wasn't even a wall, because the computer guys were sitting at their computers like nothing ever happened.
That's true. That's true.
The joke was, oh my God, the Bible was wrong. The meek aren't going to inherit the earth. The introverts are, because they're all going to come out at the end of this and go, where did everybody go? You know, it was like all the computer people sitting at their computers are going to go, wait, what happened? I mean, it was like, and we all we had a good laugh over it, but I was like, oh yeah, I guess I have to get back to work because everything seems to be the same for you guys.
Yeah. So, nice. Cool. So one of the things I noticed in your proposal was, and I love this, it says what you're doing for immersive tech is what Jim Henson did for puppetry.
Yes.
Which is so cool. Again, this kind of forging new ground. And so you are creating these kind of sub-industries because you're the first person who's really developing this for Broadway specifically. And what that does is it adds a lot to your budget. So one of the things I thought people would be interested in is to kind of hear how much this technology side is in your budget. And you have two, just to kind of preface this, you have kind of two VR budgets. You have the pre-production budget, which was, I thought it was actually kind of low. It amounted to between 8 and 9 million. And then, no, not million, 900,000. That was
right.
Right. That was the pre-production. Right. And then the actual, which is low because I expected it to be in the millions.
Yeah. It was just but that was just for pre-production. Yeah.
Right. Then I realized, oh, that's just pre-production.
Yeah.
For the actual production, you have around 8 million, which is making your capitalization obviously way more than a standard musical, Broadway musical, and not unlike what Spiderman was doing at the time. So how is that in your budget? How is that getting complicated? Because you know, Broadway budgets don't usually include those kind of line items.
Right. Again, you know, having been part of spectacle shows helps. But I do want to, you know, I do want to give a shout out to Craig Shemin, who has been a huge supporter of mine, who is the president of the Muppet Association and had worked for Jim Henson back in the day. So when this all started, he came on. So it was, and he's been supporting me whenever he can. And then, you know, when we started talking about this for VR for Broadway and all of that, where those numbers came from and whatever else was putting into consideration that instead of an off-Broadway show, I was doing VR as my off-Broadway show.
I see.
And taking that technology out of the virtual reality headset and turning it into augmented reality and video mapping and immersive reality to put into the theater, so people are not using their phones, headset, or whatever. That's all part of the same process. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It'll be the same computer imagery that, you know, will involve Christian Cordella, that will involve the tech companies and all those kinds of things that will then transfer. So it's not, oh, we're going to do this VR show and then all of this is going to change to go to Broadway. It's going to be bigger and it's going to be a musical and everything else when it goes to Broadway, but we'll still not have to start over again.
I see
where that comes from. So yes, it's a lot more for a musical when you go to Broadway, but we're spending a lot more for things that we would have had to do for an off-Broadway show in the VR.
That's true.
So
yeah.
It's where it's like you're going to spend it somewhere. It's like, are you spending it on this end or this end if you want to do, you know, if you want to make it happen. So
yeah, cool. And part of that budget too is a lot of the VR budget is just the technology itself, like creating the equipment, right, and the engineers and all of that, which is, you know, thank God the engineers don't have a union, do they?
Well, and it's creating the land of Emimencia, which is all up in the air. The only creatures that are on the ground are the goblins because they're the only ones without wings, and they've got bow and arrows. But so it's no different than creating any kind of a video game or fan world or what. They have to create this whole other world that once we have green screened the actors, and then they have to take the actors, put it into the land that they have created with all of those, all of that equipment and all of that programming and all the things that they do in their lane, and all of those things have to come together.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I mean, you really are merging multiple industries.
Yes, absolutely. So cool. Everybody plays, everybody wins.
Yeah. I love it. Just kind of a nerdy question. I'm curious as a producer, you've already done a lot of this. So do you have some of these, like the fiber optic wings, the handmade masks or costumes that you've used for previous like readings? Do you have these like in a storage unit somewhere? Or are they in your house? Like where are you keeping them?
Yeah, this is funny. I definitely have the puppets from the original Newark Theater production when Naya was a puppet and all that. Yeah. I do have the fiber optics wings are with Mel down in Florida, who is Electric Diva Creations. She's got the fiber optics, and I still have Naya's costume. But some of those costumes were repurposed because given the notes that we did get from the Duke Theater and what things were going to change, it was all going to change anyway. And now that Naya doesn't just take King Maldor's wings, she becomes this Griff fairy. That whole look is going to be different as well. So yeah, I definitely have some fiber optics lying around. I definitely have some puppets. I definitely, I'm surrounded, and I sell I still have my step and repeat from festival. That's,
Yeah, the life of a producer, which
right?
is really challenging, especially in New York City in small apartments when
Yep.
you've got to, just keep all this stuff. So
Right.
yeah, I feel your pain. I've had to give up props. I still have the props though, like stupid props from like my first show, like a baby from my first show. I'm like, it was my first show. I can't give it up. But yeah, it takes up room.
Oh, please. Ken Davenport was so thrilled that I still had the puppet that I made for when he produced Altar Boy. So I'm like, yeah, I still have the puppet. Everybody fits, that was still there.
Yeah,
so.
That comes in handy. Yeah, exactly. There's
Right?
You never know when you're going to need it for another show. That was the producer in me thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about like major influences and things in people or anything else you wanted to mention in your career that you feel have really helped you along the way.
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing I have to mention is, yes, my first job out of school was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And he has been a huge part of my life. But more to the point with this project, my lead player, Ben Vereen, I've been following him since I was 7, but I've known him personally for the last 20 years. And he always has been and always will be my lead player. And he is even in this tough time right now with what family is going through, I know he's listening and he's there for me. And so that's been huge. And also, I mean, like people like, even, oh my God. So I do have to say that back in December of 2017, when the Me Too movement hit, I thought this was all dead. I thought I had no show. It was all over. And I lost my job, my health insurance, and my project all in one day, and just sitting on my couch. And I have to give the biggest shout out ever to Ben Cameron, who is the unofficial mayor of Broadway, who then said, you know what, I'm gonna bring you to BroadwaCon with me, and you still are who you are, and you didn't do anything wrong here. And he really gave me the platform to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And I love him dearly. And I call him my Broadway brother. Yes. And Gene Fish Jr. has been, he's the CEO of the New York's Theater Festival. And I've been through all of the festivals and all those kinds of things. So he's definitely been around through this. And
Gene left a comment in the notes when you mentioned the step and repeat. He said, it's a wonderful step and repeat.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't use it for anything, because when we lost our last director and I had to call Christian Cordella again and say we have to change the logo. So the logo and everything on that step and repeat isn't even valid anymore. Everything's changed since then. So now we have
step and repeats.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, it's rolled up and it's gone. So, we'll just wait for the next one and update it. Right? So yeah, no, that was those are the big. And Jeff Ravel, who is a consultant right now, and I'm really hoping he will come on as our director when we're ready. And Greg Brown from Hard Drive Productions has been unbelievable. And then there are just a lot of people who I'm going to say got in my way. There are a lot of people that I had to remember that I was the one in the room and I was the one doing the work, and all the coaching and all the advice in the world were not people that were actually doing, they were talking. And the people that I just mentioned, helped me to remember that I am capable, and, I'm the one that's making this happen. So that's really very important to say. And I'd like to put that out there that, no one else is paying your bills and no one else is doing your project. They can talk at you all they want, but unless they're the ones sitting in the meetings and know the journey, then, their heart can be in the right place forever. but you just have to get in there and do the work.
Absolutely. And, mentors, I think, and coaches and a lot of these people are so important and helpful, but at the end of the day, it really is, you've got to have a strong, I call it vision in the work I do with artists, and really know where you're coming from and have that kind of confidence in yourself, to be able to collaborate. But it's really, it is a testament, I think, to even though, you said you've had to say no a lot, but it's a testament to your path. I think that you do have a lot of people around you who are very supportive of your work. And I think that's really something to, acknowledge. And you mentioned, kind of having to learn some of these things the hard way. And you've said to me before that you were, for a while, were doing these kind of mentoring groups, or you would put these groups together where you talked about some of, you called it safety, kind of when you're doing events. Can you tell us about those? Because that sounded really interesting.
Yeah, I taught a class. I taught like a seminar class. I don't even know what you would call it, in safety and networking. And before I threw an event or had a backers audition, if anybody hadn't been through my class before, they weren't invited, because there are right things to say and there are wrong things to say. And I was doing this before there was even a Me Too movement. I was trying to tell them that, look, even if they don't like the show, they might have liked your performance. And if you're really professional, even if they don't like anything here, they'll take your phone call moving forward. So there are the right things to say and there are the wrong things to say, and there are the wrong things to say that can put you in a bad position. And the thing that we talked about most was when, someone won't give you their business card, but they take yours, and then they call you from a restricted number. And, what's really going on?
Interesting.
And, we talked for hours about that. And, one person did come up to me and say, thank you. You saved me a year of my life.
Wow.
Yeah, because, and I wasn't saying anything bad was going to happen. I wasn't saying you were going to get raped or, attacked or anything like that. But if someone's calling you from a restricted number, that's not your Broadway debut. That's not your that's not how you become a Broadway star. And I actually did write a one act about it at one point, but it was way too controversial. No one was going near that one. It was kind of, but yeah, I mean, it was, so at the same time, you don't want them to hurt their own careers.
Right.
You don't want them walking up to a producer or investor or a director and saying something that, would offend them. Like, when you go to a backers audition and you walk up to someone and say, how do you like the show? You're putting them in a horrible position. Ever since Twitter was invented, if they say something good, they're in a horrible position. If they say something bad, they're in a horrible position. So for years, I said, you never ask that question. If you're hard up for a question to ask, or you really want to start a conversation, say, hey, what brings you here today?
Yes. Get them talking.
Yeah, because no matter what, the two of you ended up at this event somehow. So you have that in common. So it doesn't matter if they're 20 years older or they're a different profession or whatever else. You're both standing there. You both came here, and it's an incredibly safe thing and an intro to do. And staying away from, what did you think of my performance? What did you think of the script? It's like, okay, and scene, and you are so done. Go away.
I love it.
Yeah,
I think it's really important. It needs to be said.
Yeah, and it was like, oh, and also, I know you will love this, but I was also teaching them not to have someone stand there with them for 20 minutes.
For what do you, you mean?
At a networking event. Like, if you've already stood there with them for 20 minutes, they're not calling you the next day. You've already given them your pitch.
Well, it depends on what you're talking about, I suppose.
Well, I mean, so chances are they've already heard what they want to hear. And, and you kept them from seeing whoever else they wanted to see that. So they, I've had a lot of people come up to me afterwards. Well, I got stuck there for half an hour, so I'm sorry that blah, 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 and whatever. I'm like, oh, that's not good. So it's all about talking and passing.
Yeah. And that's where the elevator pitch comes in handy, and hooking them. You want them to want to know more, but then that's what the follow-up is for. If you give them too much right away, there's no follow-up.
Yes. So, and once you get that follow-up, safe ways to do that follow-up. Right.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important because I've talked a lot about this veil of silence that I think there is in the theater, but really in any industry, is where the older people will experience some of these things. We learn things the hard way, as you've mentioned. And then certainly in my case, in the beginning, I'm kind of traumatized from it. So I'm not quick to want to go out there and say, oh, hey, by the way, these terrible things happen because they happen to me. And it's hard to share that. But at the same time, the older I get, the more I feel kind of a responsibility because I see people making the same mistakes over and over again. And so I love that you do that. And I think we need more of that in the theater and in any industry of just like, putting people like you on a platform, so that they can hear, and you take away, and you kind of, the people who are coming, they can kind of mold it into what works for them, take the parts that work, but learn hear the stories and learn the lessons. I think that's really important.
I mean, when you've been a personal assistant to enough celebrities, you see the stories and you learn what you learn. But also what I found so fascinating in the beginning when I first started this was the amount of men that were like, that it was happening to, because a lot of us girls growing up, mommy says this might happen to you. Well, guess what? Mommy might not sit down with her son and say this might happen to you. So the amount of men that in their 20s that this was happening to, that were coming up and calling me and talking to me, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
And and it was, so I mean, I've been in a lot of rooms, I've been in a lot of hotels, and I've been to all the parties and whatever else, and there's a right thing to say and a wrong thing to say. And the famous story of my jumping into the fountain in the front of the Plaza Hotel is still famous, and I almost got arrested. But there are better ways to get away from a man who's, stalking you. But that was my choice at the time.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do, what's right for you. And I think we're also learning right now, from the Black Lives Matter movement, this whole other level too, that I think has also just been quiet, and when Black Lives Matter, when George Floyd, his death, and Breonna and Ahmed and all of those first came out, I was very curious because I didn't know how that was manifesting in the theater. So, and I think it took a while for it to come out, but now I was actually just at a panel that the American Theater Wing did the other day about how to move forward. And it's really helpful that people are starting to come forward now with concrete ways, like you have done for a lot of women and men, it sounds like, but now that we're coming forward, having these discussions and talking about ways to move forward, I just think it's overdue, and I'm glad we're having them. So thank you for being a part of that.
Yeah, it was funny because on one hand, yes, I see it for men and women, but to a huge extent, I never saw it in the Black light, because I've been in the world of Ben Vereen for so long. So I sort of had a warped sense of, because those were the shows that we saw, and those are the people that we met, and that was what was going on. I'm like, oh yeah, this makes sense. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, and it's not really different, but but that was my path, and it was, so, and
it is really interesting. I mean, and there's always, it's unique to everybody. The experience is unique to everybody. And that's, again, my whole thing with Another Way. Another Way is what way works for you, right, which doesn't necessarily match all these other ways. So
if you're in theater, there's no math, which is also a hard thing to tell technology people, because they're used to like putting something on the computer and they program it and it works or it doesn't, and it's 1 + 2 = 3. That's never been my life.
Yeah.
It's never wrapped up in that nice little bow. And they're used to that. They're used to, if we just do this A, B, and C, it's going to happen. Well, okay, that must be nice.
Yeah, really. That's where I think breakdowns have happened in the past between technologists and theater.
Right.
But it's good because, as we kind of talked about on the panel too, is that the technologists were starting to create their own theater anyways. So it's like, well, we really need to start bridging that divide before we kind of get, a little eclipse here. So do you have any last words for us?
Just that I'm really excited to be doing these talks as much as possible, and I love the fact that these worlds are bridged. And I just, once the new script comes out, I hope you'll look for it. And we do have a Facebook page. We do not have a website right now because we have not signed our director, but we will have that coming up. And I would love anybody to reach out with any questions or, what they might want to know about either technology theater or theater technology, because people have started calling me the Erin Brockovich of technology, which I think is kind of hysterical.
Cool. You speak VR and Broadway. How many people speak both those languages?
Broadway.
So how do people reach you? Do you have a mailing list?
I do not, but I do have. We can put my email in the chat.
And we'll also put the Facebook page. We can add that after I end this. This video will be available on YouTube, and I'll also make sure to transfer those comments or the links to the YouTube video as well. So I know, gonna wanna.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna use this moving forward. Absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
And
anything, any other pearls of wisdom from your journey?
Well, my biggest pearl is going
share with us.
Yeah, well, the biggest pearl is going to be on Friday with your podcast about, is a producer a creator? And
yes.
Here I am, and that's really the next chapter of the pearl of wisdom of, you know, what's happening right now. And you just have to tell your story, and you have to believe in you, because it's, at the end of the day, it's not a dress rehearsal.
Right.
This is your journey, and it's been a journey for 4.5 years of taking wing, and I'm thrilled to see where it's going to go from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Julie. Thank you for your inspiration, your just being you, and take care. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for being you too, because you know, you're my girl. It's awesome.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you later. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.